Okay, we are recording.
Okay, so we should get started then?
Yeah, Alex will keep trying to take us live, and since we have it recorded, we can always, post it live if there's a delay.
So I guess I want to start by thanking everybody for your patience. We actually had a dry run a week ago, but even with that, it still takes time to sort of smooth out all the rough edges, particularly when we have a lot of accessibility needs. And my name is Paul O'Hanlon. I'm the co-chair of the City-County Task Force on Disabilities. This is our first post-COVID-19 meeting. I think our last meeting was in January. So it's sort of, back in the dark ages, we had a meeting, and here finally we have another. We've never had a remote kind of YouTube Zoom-based meeting before, but this could actually be the start of something good, in the sense that I see we've got lots of attendees and people participating. Do we want to start by going through and introducing task force members? Kind of a little bit, usually we're sitting around a table and we do that. This is a little bit different, but I don't know whether that's the process we should follow. I don't know. Hillary, do you have any recommendation?
No, that sounds good to me.
Okay, so why don't we each person who's on the task force, please introduce yourself, and then afterwards we'll have staff introduce themselves so that people at least know who's who. Do you want to go next, Karen?
Okay. Karen Warman, task force member.
Hi, Hillary Roman, ADA coordinator.
John Tagg, task force treasurer.
Hi.
Sarah Goldstein, task force member.
Rich McGann, task force member. This is a great experience. I'm thrilled to be doing it this way.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Sarah. Yep.
Oh, good. I didn't know if I had my phone muted because I think it causes background. But I'm Sarah Goldstein. I'm a task force member.
Great. Kaylin, do you want to go next?
Hi, Kaylin, County ADA coordinator.
Cori, are you still on? Cori, I know, has to leave soon. Should we have, well, okay, I guess that Tina and Alisa maybe can introduce themselves later, or how do we want to do that?
It's your call, Paul, whatever you think.
All right, Tina, why don't you and Alisa introduce yourselves. You're sort of task force members in waiting.
Mm-hmm. Tina Calabro, community member.
Alisa Grishman, community member.
All right. I think that we don't really have the functionality or probably the time to have everybody introduce themselves, but I appreciate that people are on. The agenda for today is, let me pull it up real quick. Sorry. So the first agenda item is an update on the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this July is the 30th anniversary. So we'll have an update on that. Next will be old business. And as I mentioned, our last meeting was in January. I think that there were a few things on that agenda that might still be worth discussing. Third thing on the agenda is really to hear from the public. Since we haven't met since January, we're really concerned about what's happening in the community, particularly for people with disabilities, everything around COVID-19, and so I think that we want to leave the bulk of the meeting to be somewhat unstructured, but to really hear from people about what's happening, so that we can, really find out what we're dealing with. So under old business, the task force members, we had the meetings circulated, the minutes circulated. I think that what I'll do is just sort of go down the list. Or actually, we're not up to old business yet, right? We're at the point of the 30th anniversary of the ADA. Is there anybody who's prepared to give a report or an update on 30th anniversary plans?
Well, I think isn't that part of why Tina and I are here today?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Can we?
Tina, do you want to start out?
Yeah,
Or
let's
shall
start.
I?
Let's start, Alisa, with the part that we're working on together, the 30 days of the ADA. Alisa, do you want to talk about it in general? And then I can
Sure.
explain the part about the Pittsburgh participation.
Absolutely. So Disability Pride Philadelphia, which is now becoming Disability Pride PA and as a whole, has teamed up with different groups around the state to put on a 30 days of the ADA online. And in fact, if you go to their website, it's disabilitypridephiladelphia.org. And we can put that up and online, the link available. We can make the link available online, but again, disabilitypridephiladelphia.org. It's going to be 30 days of online events celebrating disability, all different aspects. There's comedians, there's panel discussions, there's a talent show, there's a little bit of everything going on during this celebration. So if you go to the website, you can find out more info, including a calendar of events of what's coming up.
Does Zoom, I guess question is whether a link could be put into chat or something.
Yeah, that's already been done.
Got it.
I just put it in the chat for everyone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Alisa, will they be going downtown? This is Paul asking.
So this is none of this is going to be in person because of the pandemic. This is all going to be online just to keep everyone safe. They've found a good platform that includes captioning, and they've done everything to make this as inclusive as possible.
I can jump in here about an event that we're planning. It's based here in Pittsburgh, but we have statewide partners. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my computer right now. I think I'm overusing it or something. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, you're
Oh, great.
fine.
Okay, because it's just going crazy. I have 2 monitors open and it's doing a lot of crazy stuff. That event is part of the 30 days of the ADA. It's going to be on July 22nd at 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. and there's an opportunity for people to engage with the event throughout the 30 days. And what it is, it's a set of 3 films that concern the history of treatment of people with disabilities in institutions. And one of those films was produced here. It's called From Wrongs to Rights. It's about the advocacy to expose abuses in institutions in the early 1970s. Another film is called I Go Home. It was produced by the PBS station in Harrisburg. It's about Pennhurst Institution and some of the issues there. And also there's a lot in there about home and community-based services and how the system started being built and what are its values today. And then the third film is called Valuing Life, the Principle of Normalization. This is basically a biography of Wolfensberger and an explanation of the concept of normalization, which means the value that people with disabilities have the right to have to live normal lives. It doesn't mean normalizing people with disabilities. It means that people with disabilities have the right to live the same kinds of lives that any person lives. And so there's a film about that as well. Those are available on the 30 Days of the ADA website and calendar. And so this film event, the films are available. And then on July 22nd, we're going to have a discussion. It will be facilitated by Guy Caruso of Temple University Institute on Disabilities. Invited guests to comment are Nancy Thaler, the former Deputy Director in the Office of Developmental Programs, and Brenda Dare or Dare. She has 2 pronunciations of her last name, and she works for Transitional Paths to Independent Living. She's going to comment. There will be other people who will be included as panelists. And then basically it's just open to anyone who wants to participate in this discussion. So that's going to be a really good event. It's the leading sponsor is the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium that Mary Hartley is the director of that, and a lot of us on that consortium are organizing this. Are there any questions about that event? And then I'd like to go on to talk about some other events that are going on with the Pittsburgh and Allegheny County ADA 30th.
Do you watch the films before the event?
Yes, you can. You can watch them at any time. And even, people can participate in the discussion on July 22nd and not have watched the films. The films are to go deeper into the subject. The discussion on the 22nd will talk about the history, but we'll also talk about the current issues of today in home and community-based services. And also we'll talk about the very active issue of the closing of 3, scheduled for the next year, closing of 2 institutions. There's 4 left in the state, and 2 are scheduled to be closed next year. Okay, so if there are no other questions about that, I encourage everybody to participate. I think it's going to be a very good discussion. I'd like to talk about a few other things that are in the works. They are...
I think Karen had her hand up, Tina. I'm sorry. Karen, did you have a question?
Yeah, what date is that?
The actual discussion is July 22nd at 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. And it will be a Zoom call. And if you go to the 30 Days of the ADA website, there will be a mechanism there to get the link to the event and to watch the films.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions about that one, I'd like to talk about access and Port Authority. I saw that Darcy Cleaver might be on the call here. So
She is, Tina, and I can allow her to talk if you.
yes.
Okay.
In case I misspeak, but my understanding of where we stand right now with the ADA 30th efforts with access and Port Authority, there will be a bus wrapped completely in ADA 30 logo, and there will be internal on the bus cards about the ADA anniversary. And also there's a monitor at the Port Authority office on Smithville Street. It will have a loop about the history of the ADA in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And that is the update that I have. Maybe Darcy wants to add some more to that.
Hi, everybody. It's Darcy at Port Authority. Nice to see all your faces and get in touch and talk about this stuff. Tina, I think that's a good assessment of where we're at with this right now for the ADA 30. I know Access is working really closely with Kim Frank in our communications department to advance all three of those items. But yes, we are continuing through with the bus wrap, and as well as the interior cards on the vehicles. And Tim is working with Karen and her staff in regards to some images and stuff for the video for the service center for the monitor.
That's great. So we will have a very visual reminder of the anniversary, which is great. The bus going through town and the internal cards will be great. We've just really been set back by the pandemic, and this is just great news that Port Authority can do this. I wanted to let you know there is another transportation related event in the works, and Darcy, you might have heard about this already. It's only been started in the last few days. The Disability History Consortium is ready to launch a short film, 5 minutes, about Paul Dick, who was very instrumental in helping to set up the access transportation system. And so we have been planning to launch this film sometime this month or early next month. Our partner on this is the Heinz History Center, and what they are working on is a panel discussion on online, Zoom, or whatever platform to go along with the launch of this film. So the film will be there, it's 5 minutes, and then there will be a panel. I don't have an up-to-date report on who the Heinz History Center is looking at as panelists, but I know that the Western Pennsylvania Disability History Consortium will be making recommendations about panelists. And also for all of you on the task force, if you have ideas of who would be a good panelist, please do send that to me. And so we are going to have input to the History Center on that. And so that is probably going to be around the 3rd week in July. So you will start to see some publicity around that. Are there any questions about that event in development?
This is Sarah again. I have another question.
Yes.
What is the first date of the first event of 30 days of the ADA? When does it first start?
The whole thing runs from June 27th to July 26th.
Thank you.
And Alisa, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I do believe that the governor is going to be involved in a statement of some kind statewide about this. Is that correct?
Yes, the governor is going to be doing address of some sort to start out everything. And they're going to be doing their traditional flag raising where they raise the ADAPT flag, I think, or the disability flag up at the state capitol.
And I see Cori has a hand up, so whenever.
This is Cori. I hear Tina's request for panelists and in terms of the disability community. I just wondered if there's funding to pay an honorarium to those panelists.
You know what, Cori, I don't know the answer to that, so let me make a note of it and find out about that.
Rich, can I ask a
Thank
comment?
you.
Hi.
I was wondering, so what if people make a complaint about the kneeling for the flag? I know that's been an issue here recently, and I don't know how we're going to handle that, and do we have any approach to what we're going to do if people decide to kneel?
So this is a different type of flag raising, but if people choose to kneel, I am 100% okay with that. But I think it's all going to be recorded anyway, just because of social distancing rules.
Okay. I'm going to talk about one last ADA 30th event. This is also bigger than Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. The United States State Department has a function called International Visitors, and here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County we have a chapter of it. It's called Global Pittsburgh. It used to be called Pittsburgh Council on International Visitors. So that's a State Department effort, and there's almost every large city in the nation has an international visitors program. The concept of it is citizen diplomacy. They bring visitors to the United States from different cities, and they acquaint them with things that we're doing in many areas. I mean, any aspect of the life of the city. Pittsburgh has been able to have quite a bit of notoriety in the State Department for our disability services and our some of the advanced things that we do here. You know, we have technology, we have a lot of philanthropy around disability issues, and we have just a lot of great people here in our area. So Global Pittsburgh has brought in many people with disabilities and people who work in disability fields to our area. So the State Department is having something called the ADA 30th Gold Star program, and Pittsburgh was selected as one of the cities to host an international visitor online and to have that person essentially do their visit virtually. So, and what they did is they picked the 3 cities and 3 outstanding advocates in the world. And our advocate, the one that's coming here, is from Nigeria. And he's I've learned a lot about him. He's a fantastic advocate. It's a terrible story. He lost both his hands and arms in a war atrocity. He's in his 40s, I'd say. And so he, after his injury, he became a disability rights advocate, and he runs a disability rights organization in Nigeria. So the Disability History Consortium and ADA 30th Committee and some other groups are working together with Global Pittsburgh to put together a virtual tour. It's pretty sure that the tour is going to include technology with some things at Pitt and CMU and Rory Cooper and other people that are involved in the technology side of things. There's going to be a virtual visit with young advocates, people that have created change in our community and continue to make change. There's going to be a home visit, which is always part of their Global Pittsburgh thing, where they show a person in their home and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of parts to this, but it's really going to be great. And so we're you'll be hearing more about it. So any questions about that?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. It'll take place sometime between the 8th of July and the 22nd of July.
Cool. Anything else on the 30th anniversary of the ADA? Going. I don't see any questions in the chat, so if I'm missing anything, let me know.
Paul, before we move on, can I just do a quick access check? If anybody's having any issues with questions or accessing CC or anything at all, just let us know. Put something in the chat, raise your hand, just let us know.
Cool. I guess the next agenda item is old business, and I don't know what I'm torn between giving a brief summary of the minutes of our last meeting to remind folks what our old business was back in January. But if there's anybody that has an issue of old business that they would like to raise, this would be a good time. The summary of what was discussed last time is that there was discussion around the lack of a policy for what's known as sandwich boards. Those are things that essentially are advertising that businesses often put out on the sidewalk in front of the business with information about, I don't know, you know, what you can buy there or stuff like that. And that sandwich boards have been a growing accessibility issue for people because they block the sidewalk. And there was, my memory, if my memory is correct, within, I don't know, probably within the last 10 years, an effort by city council to come up with a sandwich board policy, but that ended up going nowhere apparently. So there was discussion about that. There was discussion about the whole issue of complete streets, and in particular, what was occurring with regard to accessible parking, that a lot of the changes that have been made around bike lanes have eliminated accessible parking spaces, and the whole BRT process is going to create a whole series of accessibility issues for the stretch between Oakland and downtown on 5th and Forbes. So there was discussion about that. Also, discussion about the 30th anniversary, which we just had, and then an update regarding a film that the task force made some years ago called Small Differences, and efforts to make a sort of sequel to that. And then the last thing I see that was discussed was concerns around voting and how the election would be from a standpoint of accessibility. So I don't know whether anybody has anything that they want to raise from that series of issues regarding old business.
This is Hillary. Tina has a question. She has her hand up.
Yes. I wanted to report on the small differences video that let's see, the Disability History Consortium asked for permission to post the small differences video to its website, which is public, and then anyone can access small differences. So we did get the video from Tony Buba, the director and producer of that, and Paul, you signed off on giving permission for this to be posted. So I just wanted to update that. And then I have offered the video. This is, I'm not a technology person, but this is the good digital version. This is not a DVD. This is straight from Tony Buba and given to me in such a large size that I can't even open it on my computer. So it's a high quality digital version, and he's actually sent me 3 different ones, and so we can select amongst them to pick the best one. I've offered the video to Hillary for the city and to Kaylin for the county. Also, Heinz History Center will get a copy as well. And so that's pretty much taken care of in terms of like, do we now, and when I say we, I mean like, does the task force now have access to the best quality version of that? And the answer is yes, we have it.
Tina, just jumping in really quick. This is Hillary. Cori has a hand up.
Sure.
Hi, this is Cori. I'll have to pop out in the meeting in a few minutes for some medical stuff, but I did want to, Paul had raised the issue of voting, and I wanted to make a quick comment on that I think that it's really important that the CCTD makes a statement to the county or whomever made the decision in terms of the conglomeration of polling places, knowing that there are polling places in the county that could only be accessed by car, where there are no sidewalks, where disabled people had to, cross areas that were unsafe for them. And that was really, really bad. And in the future, if we need to continue social distancing for a matter of years or a matter of months, we have to really be much more considerate of people's needs in terms of polling places in the future.
If you could contact me afterwards with this and we can go over specific polling locations, I would really appreciate it. I want to get down on which ones, because
Kaylin, I can barely hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Hold on, let me see if I can turn up my volume. 1 second. Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, yeah, regarding the polling location.
Comment as well.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Rich, I have a comment as well. This is Paul.
Go ahead.
Also, with regard to voting, I was very eager to go to do that, but, there was no interpreter, and I needed to make sure that, somebody was going to be able to show up to be able to assist with the communication. You've got people who have vision problems and aren't able to see that, and they need assistance as well. And some deaf with low vision that need that interpreter because they can't read the voting machines. So, we really need to be able to rely on that, and as of yet haven't been able to.
Right, so to first jump in on what Cori said about the polling locations, if Cori, you can reach out to me about the specific polling locations that were having issues. I know, like you said, with COVID-19, the numbers of polling locations were downsized a lot. So they were trying to find polling locations that were schools and gymnasiums that were supposed to have accessible parking closest to the route. So please go over that with me afterwards so I can check that off with the elections division. And Rich, with yours about the interpreters, I do remember you reaching out to me about that. The new voting machines have Braille on it. So maybe it was, could have been a miscommunication with the poll workers, not knowing how to inform voters about that. I have to talk to them about maybe ramping training And we have to figure out a way that you can be able to request that interpreter in advance. You're supposed to reach out to me, but again, maybe with elections going on, it could have slipped out with not having that information provided. But for future elections, as the way things are going, it's looking like we're going to keep it how it was last time, with trying to keep social distancing and making sure that we can provide those accommodations and interpreters there beforehand, so we don't run into those issues on actual election day.
Kaylin, one last comment, because I really have to hop off of here. Like, we have to remember that like accessible parking isn't everything. I have a mobility impairment that has been developing for some time, and my polling place was a mile away. I don't drive. So we have to think about other things as well, other ways of getting around. And I will reach out to you. Thank you.
Great. I see Karen has her hand raised.
Karen?
Yes, to comment about Kayla's comment. There was no training this year because of the COVID-19. See, I'm a poll worker, and they didn't really have training this year because of the COVID-19. They canceled it. And as far as some of the polls did have accessibility, but the most part, some of them, they had to move most of the polls to the ones that did have accessibility, but to the one where they had bigger amount of space to where they could have social distancing. So that way that they had a lot of room to where the people were able to be 6 feet apart, and also the poll workers were able to have enough room to be 6 feet apart as well. So that, yeah, that way we were all able to do the social distancing as well as the people who came in and voted.
Right. I know with the training, the poll workers were back in February and March before, you know, COVID happened and everything was pretty much on hold. So that's something I'll talk to the training team to figure out a better way that we can communicate on how to help those with disabilities, make sure they understand the functions. And yeah, just like you guys said before, not just about accessible parking. It's beyond that. It's about, you know, other disabilities that they may, you know, encounter with voters. So I'll definitely touch base with them on that and see if we can make some improvements before the November election.
Well, we only had like one machine there, and that was only for the deaf. But we didn't have one for the seeing. That was about it.
There should have been, yeah, depending on the size of the polling location, they could have had 1 or 2 express vote machines. At least at my polling location, they had 2. So again, yeah, it depends on the number of districts were all combined, but the machine, everyone was able to use it. We tried to encourage all voters to use it. So anyone with visual or hearing impairment should have been able to, or if it was available, they should have been able to test it out. I know a few people, they were able to use it fine. So maybe it was the features that, again, like I said before, poll workers weren't aware of, but I'll touch base with them and see what we can work on.
Yeah, I'm also going to be in touch base with the people as well, because Rich McGann also contacted me about his issue, and I'm like kind of like a little bit, you know, because what if we also had other issues with it too, and that also needs to be taken care of, yes. Not just for him, but for anybody else that comes in as well.
Right. Yeah, let's get that straightened out before the November election.
Yeah. That would be a good idea for anybody.
This is Rich. I have a comment as well. I also wanted to tell you too, that all of the volunteers at the various polling stations, they didn't know how to work the machines. They absolutely did not know what to do. They didn't know what buttons to push. They couldn't figure out how to get it adjusted to the needs that I had. So they need more training.
Okay, I will note that, let them make sure that we get more thorough, checklists and guidelines for them to follow. If, poll workers aren't aware, they should be able to easily access it right then and there. So something I'll work on with them. Thank you for all letting me know on this. This is all good feedback. I can bring it back to them to make sure we don't have any issues for the next one.
Any other comments regarding voting?
This is Wes Speary. I was asked to unmute myself. I just posted in the comments in the Q&A. My polling place was at the Pittsburgh Fulton School, and I believe it had an accessibility entrance, but the actual physical space inside where people voted, there was really not enough room for any social distancing at all between the volunteers between each other, as well as between the voters themselves, like from voter to voter, and then not really room for social distancing between voter and volunteer. And with everything being so close together, I'm not sure how it could have been practically accessible for someone with mobility issues.
Wes, may I ask, where is Fulton School? Where's that located?
That's like East Liberty, Highland Park. The address is 5799 Hampton Street in Pittsburgh.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Caitlin, there's also, Paul, there's a question on voting by mail in the Q&A. I'm not sure if somebody wants to take a look at that, because it has to do with registering online for vote by mail.
Yeah, I will allow Sarah to talk and then she can ask us.
Okay, well, first I want to say, Wes, yeah, I'll look into that polling location and see if we can figure out another location that would have better room. It might have to be a thing where, because of social distancing, they would have to limit the number of voters that could go at once. If it's, only 1 or 2 people at a time, then it's going to be 1 or 2 people at a time with all the poll workers. So they gave guidelines for each poll worker and the lead man's kind of to follow it, but with each location, they're different sizes. So I'll look into that and see what I can find. And Sarah, your question about the voter.
Well, hold on one second. Wes, did Wes identify himself?
Wes did. Wes works for the Commission for Human Relations, but if he has more that he'd like to add.
Thank you.
Feel free. Yeah, he can unmute himself whenever he wants.
Nothing more to add, no.
This is Paul. I have more comments to make. I also wanted to say that should we have an emergency and we're unable to vote in that location, I'm not sure what we're going to do if all those polling sites are closed due to government announcement that we're unable to vote. And if people are in that situation, what are we going to do? Do we have a backup plan, a plan B for should that happen?
You know what? I'm not 100% sure. I know there have been incidents where individuals' names weren't in the poll books, and so they had to fill out a provisional ballot. So I know there's a backup for that. I'm not really sure if there's a backup if you mean if like the machine was broken, or you mean if they didn't have an interpreter. Is that what you mean by that question? If they weren't able to vote?
Yes, all of those scenarios. If they're unable to vote, what do we do?
Okay, so then that's something I would have to work with the elections team to figure out if we can, like you said, kind of have like an interpreter on the go, ready at that time. And we do have an ADA team that goes out to those polling locations in case there were any technical difficulties with the express vote machines. There's also in the guidelines for the poll workers, there's like hotline numbers that they can contact if there were issues. So there are some steps. I just don't have them right in front of me to tell you exactly, but I know they have taken some steps to that. With interpreters, it's always important that we schedule that beforehand. So, filling out a request, accommodation, and letting us be able to prepare, where and when you would need to go vote.
Karen.
Oh, Karen, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself first.
Karen, you're still muted. Hey, Karen, you're muted.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Muted.
Well, if the machine has to be broken, but if they bring somebody with them to help them, they are allowed to bring somebody in to help them out.
Yes, they are.
So, I mean, they are allowed to bring somebody with them, like a family member if they want to bring a family member with them to help them out, or an interpreter with them if they're deaf, blind, or deaf, blind, mute, something like that, whatever. They are allowed to bring somebody with them to help them out.
Right. And Sarah, to answer your question, you asked why are public libraries not being used for polling places. I am not sure how they decided to pick the polling locations. I just know that they just picked whatever they could grab, I think, that had the most room and most accessible. I'm unsure about libraries. I know they were closed for COVID-19. It could have been for that reason.
Mad because if you bring up voting by mail.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, was that? That's all I was gonna say. I'm not sure why they did not pick libraries, but I can see what they decided, what was the guidelines for the polling locations.
John, I assume that you weren't intending that comment for everybody?
Comment.
Huh?
What comment?
Oh, you said something about vote by mail.
Oh, no, there was a question in the Q&A about voting by mail. I noticed that because that's how I voted by mail. There was a question about the process, I think, Paul.
We have a member of the public named Sarah Capps who had that question. I've allowed, given her permissions to talk. So Sarah, if you want to make any clarifications or ask any more questions, feel free.
Hi, my name is Sarah Capps. I am a city employee as well, but I'm here representing myself as a citizen. I've brought this issue up with the state supervisor of elections, with the state attorney general, all of my elected officials. So basically, the website to request a vote by mail ballot, regardless of whether you're disabled or not, since the state legislature changed the choice to just be vote by mail, just I want to vote by mail, it still leads you through the are you disabled, yes or no, and then proceeds to ask you to not only disclose your disability, which is against the ADA, and then provide your doctor's name and contact information. I moved up from Florida about 3 years ago. I've worked with major supervisors of elections in Duval County and Hillsborough County, as well as Pinellas and Pasco. I was kind of floored to see this question, that this was a barrier. I called the Allegheny supervisor of elections and talked to him directly. His office said, oh, we'll just bypass it, do a workaround, do this. And I'm like, that's unacceptable, because if you tell me I can do a workaround, that's not a policy. That's a free pass. That's not for everybody who's disabled and sees this and just gives up on the process or gives over information. I asked him how he kept the personal private information that they gathered. I asked the state what they did with this information that was gathered, and neither could tell me how that information was stored other than it goes on an Excel spreadsheet. We're talking about people's names and their medical conditions being kept on spreadsheets throughout the state without any type of HIPAA protections. meaning if I applied for a job with Allegheny County, they could look up whether or not I chose to vote by mail and could see what my disability was. I think it's kind of a huge loophole and a huge issue that the state not only needs to update its website, and each individual county needs to make an effort to, one, store that medical information that they have previously collected according to HIPAA, and then either disband collecting it going further or make some sort of policy to do so. I've brought this up to multiple elected representatives. I started this journey back in December. This was pre-COVID. I kept going into engaging with people. I have a list of who I talked to and when, if anybody would like it. But basically it fell on deaf ears of, we are not going to change our policy. We are not going to change our website. We are not going to do anything to change this, but we'll make a special exception for you. I never received my vote by mail request and had to go to a polling place, the same one that the gentleman mentioned earlier, that also was not physically accessible for me to go in walking with a cane. It's extremely difficult. It's something that's not only a statewide issue, but also a county local government issue, and I would really like to see it addressed.
Yeah, Sarah, I appreciate you telling me all that information. If you can actually contact me after this, so we can, I can figure out who you spoke to and where everything led to, that would be really helpful, so I can kind of jump on the bandwagon and see, you know, where I can help out. I'm gonna have to pretty much do what you did, reach out to the elections department, start from there, figure out some type of policy on, like you said, HIPAA. So I'm sorry, I don't want to say that I don't have the answers right now, but I have to look into it more so I can help you out and move further with this. Because that's, like you said, a lot to address, like a state thing. I definitely want us as a county to address that. And I know
and trying to report it to the state, the Attorney General's office told me to go to the website and report it. And the drop-down menu for, are you reporting, why are you reporting this? If you click disability, it goes into the same questions again. Are you disabled? What is your disability? And give us your doctor's name and contact. I haven't had to deal with that level of intrusion with my medical information since the 90s when I was living in Georgia.
Well, yeah, this is Paul. Let me just sort of bracket one small part of this, namely the question about disability and doctor. That is a state law requirement that predates the ADA, predates HIPAA, and has not been updated. But it's not a county issue. It really is a state issue. It is in state law that it requires that.
Yeah.
Now, and let me also sort of say that everything about elections is public information except for who you vote for. So whether you're registered to vote, what party you're registered, whether you've requested an absentee, the basis for your request, your claim of a disability, all of that is public information. So I'm sort of reinforcing what Sarah's saying, namely that this is an issue. Now, I should also say it's an issue that I brought up to the state 20 years ago. So it's an issue that they are very well aware of and that they're doing nothing about. So I just think that it's outrageous and sort of echo what Sarah's saying. Rich, you have something?
Can I add something to that too, Paul?
Yeah.
I really do want to add to that because I want to let Representative Dan Miller, I will let him know because he is the Disability Summit. He chaired that last year, and Paul and I, he and I both presented to legislation and we let them know. And so I want to thank you, Sarah, for sharing and bringing it up here. And I also want to share that information with Dan Miller. So please feel free to reach out to him. And I think between You and I doing that, Paul doing that, and us reaching out to legislation will have a big impact. So thank you for your comments.
Just want to note that Ali Abdullah also has a question statement. And I don't know if we're wrapped up with voting. I'm just going to let Ali jump in whenever he's ready.
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Is that okay, Paul? You go for it? Okay.
So you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Ali Abdullah from the Disability Compliance Office for the Housing Authority City of Pittsburgh. And this is an issue, it's kind of, I guess if you want to call it old business or historical continuity, as it relates to basically like how law enforcement has dealt, you know, African Americans and those with disabilities as well. And so this issue was brought up at least one other time that I'm aware of in 2008 after the murder of Antoine Rose, who basically disability rights advocate Dustin Gibson, he came to one of the task force meetings. And at that time, he asked the task force if the task force would be willing to issue a statement regarding law enforcement and how people of color and people with disabilities are treated. However, during that time, it seemed like the issue kind of went mostly unaddressed by the task force. And then recently, the Disability Rights PA, they actually issued a statement on June the 5th. And I've attached a link in the chat as it relates to that particular statement, just acknowledging the death of George Floyd regarding his tragic murder. And then, so I'm asking if the task force is willing to issue a statement now. And I also wanted to know, like, basically, what are communications as it relates to the task force when it comes to like police engaging with people with disabilities, especially those of color. I do know, based upon watching the media, several individuals basically were accused of resisting arrest when the actual issue was they had a heart condition or some other kind of disability. And, you know, basically it basically caused them to end up losing their life because they were accused of resisting arrest when the reality was they couldn't breathe because of a heart condition or some other condition. So I think this is, I mean, it's like dead silence, all I hear is crickets. So it's definitely something that should be addressed.
Yeah, I agree. The issue predates my tenure with the task force, but I would definitely be interested in reopening this issue if the task force is interested in issuing a statement. I know, was it when Gabe McMorland was on the task force, there was some discussion around policing. I'm not, obviously, I haven't been here for that long, but I would love to hear more about the history of that issue with the task force.
And yes, this is Rich again. Again, Rich McGann here. I do also want to let you know the situation comes back to training of the police. We do have, they do have a CIT training, it's a crisis intervention training that the police are required to take. Before it was on a monthly basis, and I know they've changed the schedule, and I'm not sure what that looks like currently. However, the police do need that training, and they need to understand about various disorders, whether that be emotional disorders. Those are very critical for our officers to know about. They need to know so they can do their job, how to de-escalate people if necessary, so they can do the best that they possibly can do. People are at risk. And yes, we have some wonderful officers, but they're also putting people at risk because of their ignorance. They need training. They're nervous to react to certain things, but in their reactions, they get nervous. But we need officers that are well equipped and well trained to handle whatever comes their way. So I really encourage the process of CIT, maybe partnering with them so that they can get the training that they need to be able to encounter and work with the disability community.
And Wes has a hand up as well.
Hi, this is Wes Speary again, Deputy Director of the City of Pittsburgh's Commission on Human Relations. This is in response to Ali. I posted my contact information as far as my email address goes and our website that's got our phone number, an online form and the commission's email address for contacting us about any discrimination related issues that are happening within the city of Pittsburgh. And so if you or anyone else wants to contact me directly about that, it could, whether it's to file a complaint on your behalf or someone wants to file a complaint, or, you know, just to help engage in this conversation. I mean, this is something that we're looking at as the policing issue as well. So again, if you want to contact me or go to our website and contact us that way, you're welcome to do that.
Hey, Paul, it's John. Hey, Paul, it's John. I think we need to develop a statement, and in other words, because I'm not sure when the next time we're going to meet, but I think we need to develop some sort of statement on this. I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, but I'd look to you to see what you think about it.
Well, I was trying to remember the context of the conversation about a statement, and I think that it was related to a bill that was submitted to county council for the creation of a county-wide civilian review board that would essentially mirror the city's police review board. And my recollection is that that didn't pass. So I guess the question I have is, you know, whether there's anything pending at the county level or the city level that is relevant to this. I'm just, you know, I confess I'm a little bit underwhelmed that public statements that aren't really tied to any practical specific request or demand doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But it would be best if there was something going on. But what is it that we would be asking for, I guess, is the next question. I also want to say, in response to Rich, I'm a little bit unsure about the whole miracle of training, because I think that part of what we are seeing is something that's deeper than a training issue, namely a culture issue, and that no amount of training of a group of people who are part of a group that the culture of which is hostile to the training, it's, you know, people are just gonna sort of have
definitely right, Paul. Yes.
Their arms crossed and, you know, sort of do me, you know, like kind of, and I'm not sure that that's, I'm not sure that the evidence is that that's working. But anyway, so I'm open to, certainly open to the task force making a statement. But I guess the question I have is, you know, what would be the strategic step that we could really try to push for here?
Well, hey, Paul, there is obviously there's a civilian review board in the city, but the civilian review board in the county, I'm not sure where that stands, but that went nowhere. So I think what you're asking, making a statement is fine, but should there be some sort of an ask in that statement? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, I mean, if we're going to make a statement, I would prefer to make a statement that really pushes something positive to happen, rather than just sort of complaining.
So what if, for example, we decided to support
Definitely. Oh, yes.
A county civilian review board, if that, because again, it didn't go anywhere with the county council. So, but I'm wondering whether that be something as a task force we would support, because remember, that's broader than just what happened with Mr. Floyd. It's broader than that. It would involve people with disabilities also. So I'm wondering if we should make some statement along those lines about us supporting the creation of a civilian review board at the county level.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes.
The other thing that's probably relevant is that I don't really remember specifically what time or how long ago this discussion happened. But since then, there's been pretty substantial changes in who is on county council. And I think that, Liv Bennett and a few others that have been elected since then, I know are talking a whole lot about what kind of changes could be made. I wonder whether inviting them to a task force meeting to have a discussion. I think that one of the tragic truths is that in terms of the number of people killed by the police, it's a shockingly high percentage of people who are people with disabilities, and far in excess of our sort of statistical numbers. So and I don't say that to erase the kind of racial aspect of police problems, but I think that there's an overlay of disability that we can't ignore.
Oh, this is Alisa. I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt because, like, I love you and your foot is just going into your mouth further and further. This isn't about disability. This is about race, and this isn't about solving a problem in this moment. It's about creating a statement condemning what's going on. And that's what the ask is. If you haven't seen the hundreds of statements being put out by agencies from as big as, multi-million-dollar corporations to, little mom and pop groups and things like that, just condemning what happened and supporting Black Lives Matter. That's what the ask is. Nobody's asking us to solve the problem, just to say something condemning what happened. It happens to disabled people too. I got shoved out of my wheelchair by police. I still don't think that, that I think you're missing the point.
Rich, I see you have your hand.
This is Sarah. I'm not so sure that asking for disabilities to be considered is against the idea of what we want to do, because mental health people or behavioral health people are often, thought to be guilty when not guilty by police and stuff like that. And so I don't know if we can't combine the two asks. I don't know if we can't condemn what's happened and say that this happens to people with disabilities too, and racial disparity. I know I would work with another grassroots organization where someone just accused me of being hostile. And I've checked with other people on the committee, and no one thinks I've been hostile. And you just have to, we don't know why, we had to put a delay on us talking it out, but I just think it's a good reminder to include other disabilities in a statement about race, because it's an inclusion factor.
Yeah, this is Rich. I have a comment. I want to add on something. I think, the points that there are some, Black individuals that have a disability as well. I mean, for example, why, do the police possibly shoot a deaf person that has a hearing problem? Why? There was one deaf individual that was walking with a cane, and it was the wrong kind of cane, but, they couldn't tell that the person actually had an eye problem as well. And so the police asked the man, and the man got nervous, and he actually kind of tried to hit with the cane, and the police shot him. And that, you know, there are some Black people that have a disability. I mean, we're not saying that everybody does, but I think it's important to figure out how to help, you know, whether or not you're utilizing interpreters in those situations. There was one Black man that was from Detroit. And he didn't understand that the police were there. And, you know, someone nearby was yelling out that, hey, he can't hear you, he can't hear you. And the police got very confused. They did not understand that, you know, why didn't the person just say he's deaf? They just said he can't hear you, he can't hear you. So we need some clarification so that everybody understands the issues.
Karen, I see your hand.
Nobody asked to be nobody asked to get a disability. So we shouldn't have that. I mean, how am I going to put this? Okay, we didn't ask to be disabled, so we shouldn't have to ask to be, brutalized by police. You know, I mean, there's got to be a way to come together with the police and disabilities together. You know, more ever now than there is in the past.
You're right, Karen.
I mean, nowadays it's just like, I know the world over saw that video of George Floyd. 8 to 9 minutes. I mean, 8 to 9 minutes. I mean, that was too long. I mean, think of it, if it was any of us. I mean, 8 to 9. That cop could have done something. I mean, that's brutality right there. That was brutality right there. You know, I mean, that cop was, it's just, nah. I mean, we got to come together between with the cops and disabilities. We got to come together somehow.
Thanks, Karen. Christy Troutman has a comment to make.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I also want to speak to the topic of the intersection of systemic racism and disability. I think it has certainly been shared and said that there is really a significant intersection that I think many of us understand, that systemic racism is a real contributing factor to people developing disabilities and chronic health issues. And so the question that brought me to this meeting today is the task force interested in doing two things? One is taking a stand and being overt about the fact that the City-County Task Force on Disability is specifically advocating for people of color with disabilities. That would be one question about the statement. And the second is that there's been quite a bit of policy discussion, at least at the city, I'm sure also at the county. Over the weekend, the city released a press release that was announcing a new Office of Community Health and Safety, which is about, my understanding is, reallocating public safety dollars away from police and to investing in social workers, public health workers, other agencies that will respond to community needs that really police are not positioned to be responding to. I think it was a really important step forward, and I was curious about whether the task force, if that was something the task force would specifically get involved in.
Well, this is Paul, and I sort of echo the sense that it was a very important thing. I was happy to see it. I guess that the question of whether the task force is going to get involved, certainly if we were invited in, it would make it easier. But I think that my position simply is that I'm not a fan of sort of random sort of condemning statements. I'm more in favor of us looking for how we can strategically push things in a direction that we want it to go. And I think that sort of the relationship of the police to the community is an important one to us. So I'm simply looking for how we can push or advocate for specific changes rather than make a sort of condemnation without specific action items.
This is Alisa, and my final time interrupting today. Nobody is asking our very, very white task force what they're fond of doing or not. We have a Black community member asking us to make a statement, and we, a bunch of white people, are essentially saying, no, we want to center disability as opposed to centering.
Nobody's saying no. Who's saying no, Alisa?
You
I didn't
basically
say no.
just.
No, I didn't say no once. What I said was, what is the specific things that we could push? Well, maybe we should invite people in who are actually designing things so that we can have a discussion with them about disability issues and how we can get behind it. I mean, where have I said no? Who's saying no?
This isn't about disability. This is about race.
This is the City-County Task Force on Disability. I realize that.
Would it be constructive to have a subcommittee? And maybe that's something that Ali would be interested in being a part of, or, you know, anybody from the task force, you know, friends of the task force, anybody who's interested, maybe we could form a subcommittee.
Sounds like a good idea.
Sure, that would be good. Yep. Yep.
I'll go for it.
All right, so do we, okay, so my sense is that there's probably unanimous agreement on the task force to form a subcommittee. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? Hearing nobody, do we have anybody who's volunteering to do that?
I volunteer.
Karen?
This is Rich, I volunteer.
Rich?
This is Sarah. I volunteer.
I will as well.
Hillary? Anyone else want to?
Hey,
I was wondering if you could volunteer, Paul.
I'd be happy to.
I'm not volunteering, Paul, but I just looked up, you know, what Ali had mentioned about what the disability rights of PA basically has. So they make a statement in there. So if you get on their website, you can look that up about what it is, and it does involve comments about disability in it. So we might want to take a look at that, or the subcommittee might want to take a look at that.
Okay, anything else regarding the subcommittee, who's on it, the discussion we've had?
Does it make sense to reconvene about this at our next meeting? Put it on the agenda, maybe?
Now, I see the next on the agenda, we're talking about, I believe it's COVID-19 in the green phase and accessibility.
Yes. Now, and I think that there was something that Tina was in the process of reporting on that we got on this subject, and I'm not sure she was ever finished.
It has something to do with COVID-19, so this might be a good time to do that. I got permission from Hillary to share my screen. This is about a city action that was taken last week in regard to COVID-19, and here in Highland Park, and my interpretation of it is that it discriminates against people with disabilities. So I prepared a slideshow, and I want to share that with you. It's very short. So I'm going to share my screen right now. I hope to anyway. Okay, share that. Okay, so I'm sorry I don't have the right format on this, but I think you'll be able to see it. So just for people that don't know me, I'm a Highland Park resident, park user, and parent of a 25-year-old son with disabilities. And I hope that this will move along. Let's see here. Just a sec. Let me see if I can advance this. All right. Are you able to see this, everyone?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, great. Okay, so on June 10th, there was a press release from the city about the Reservoir Loop in Highland Park, and that it would be converted to vehicle-free space. So it was announced on the 10th of June, and it was implemented on the 11th, so the very next day. Part of that press release is does make a reference to the ADA in closing this loop. It says that the main entrance to the park from North Highland Avenue will be used as a one-way circular drop-off. And ADA parking is available in the parking lot at the end of Farmhouse Drive. So this is in the press release. I wanted to note here that there is no signage at the entrance of the park about this ADA.
Sorry, Tina, I don't mean to interrupt you. We got a comment to make sure that our interpreters are visible. Is everybody able to pin the interpreter with the slideshow still? Does anyone need help?
Be able to make them, there's pin and spotlight. If you choose spotlight video, it should put them in the front for everyone.
Is anybody having problems accessing that feature? Okay. I think there was a concern that when it's live streamed, we won't be able to see it. And so let's see. Heather says that the host can make it pinned. I've just not encountered this situation, so forgive me.
Yeah, Hillary, if you go over and hover over Amber and Heather, you can, in those three dots, choose to spotlight.
Aha, okay. Okay, we've got spotlight, and hopefully that takes care of it. But let me know, please feel free to let me know if that's not working.
Okay, and as much as possible, I'll read what is on the slides as well as what's on the screen. Okay, so this is from the press release. There was no, there still is, as far as I can tell this morning, no signage about, at the main entrance, about what people with disabilities, how they're supposed to understand the new configuration in terms of ADA access. So it appears that the city did not consider how people with mobility limitations would access park amenities that are located along the 1.3 mile Reservoir Drive, meaning park amenities that are not located near the main entrance. The ADA accommodations that are mentioned in the press release relate to the main entrance, which is a, just a certain area coming right in, and then it's from there you cannot, no vehicles are allowed on the drive, only people who can walk or move along, bicycles, and if you need ADA parking, you cannot have that at this time. So this relates to Title II of the ADA that it prevents the government from denying service to people with disabilities. Government facility services and communications must be accessible.
This is Rich. Can I make a comment?
Yeah, Rich, could you hold on for just 1 minute? Let me get through this really quick, because I'm afraid the meeting's going to end and I'm not going to be able to get this point out there. The point I'm trying to make is that by closing Reservoir Drive to vehicles, the city is eliminating access to amenities located along the road. This action discriminates against people with disabilities. It violates Title II of the ADA. And so I wanted to show you some pictures of amenities that are on the 1 mile Reservoir Drive that are now not accessible to anyone that needs a vehicle to get to the amenity. Picnic shelters. There's a few of them, just a couple. There is a playground that's accessible. There has been on that Reservoir Drive an accessible parking space right in front of the playground. People that need that access cannot drive to that accessible parking space at this time. And the main entrance ADA accessibility that's in place is now located at 0.1 mile from the drop-off and 0.3 miles from the parking lot. So it's not true access to this playground. And I want to note there that I think it was last year, the city put in an accessible swing in that playground. There it is, but a person with a disability, child, cannot access this unless they walk a third of a mile to it. There's a scenic overlook on that drive. There's picnic areas. There's seating all along the loop. And this is a man who, picture of a man who is parked outside the entrance to the park this past weekend. He cannot find a parking place in the main entrance. He wants to enjoy the park at a point that is about a half a mile from the main entrance. He wants to sit at a picnic table about halfway over the length of the loop, and he cannot do that. So anyway, I'll stop sharing my screen at this point. And Rich, do you want to say what your question is now?
Yes, thank you. I was concerned with everything that's been happening with COVID because there are a lot of deaf and hard of hearing that have been reaching out to me and also complaining about the interpreting issues that they've been having, lack of interpreters. No one knows sign language out there, and they want the clear masks because they cannot see the interpreters. The interpreters have to wear masks, but we can't see the interpreters' lips. There's a lot of language that happens on their lips, but at the same time, it's not just interpreters that have to wear masks, it's any individual that we come in contact with. We have no ability to attempt to read lips or attempt to get what people are saying, and I get that people are afraid, but at this point, we need some sort of discussion to happen as to what we can do so that there can be communication and we don't have communication problems as a result from the masks that people are wearing. We really need to think about every individual and how this affects everybody. As I said, this is a once in a lifetime thing that is happening. I understand that, but how can we set ourselves up for the future? How can we learn from this to be better prepared in the event that something like this should or could happen again?
Tina, was there anything?
Oh, yeah, I'm done. I've been communicating with Hillary since last week about this. And so, Hillary, do you want to bring us up to date?
So I've been given a couple updates from DOMI. I do believe they're going to make some adjustments. I don't really have those to present to you. I'd hope that somebody would be here to speak to that, but I think that they will. I think that they're just trying to get everything together right now. I'm not sure if it would make sense in the interim to, you know, send something out to you guys about that once they have that put together. But I do know that the city's addressing it, and they've heard your concerns, and I will share your PowerPoint with the relevant parties with the city. And I think that it really clarifies the issues, Tina, especially with the pictures. You know, I think, and I see Andrew's back, so Andrew might want to jump in too. He's privy to more conversations than I am internally, but I think that there will be more information to be shared. I'm just reticent to do it because I don't want to announce anything that I'm not sure of.
Yeah, and I think just to follow up, and sorry, Tina, I missed a portion of your presentation. I know that, you know, there are, you know, kind of people looking at additional opportunities to provide ADA accessible, you know, to provide ADA parking, you know, whether that's on the loop at the entrance or allowing people with placard to be able to access additional sections of the loop on Reservoir Drive, you know, to be able to allow for parking for persons with disabilities, you know, closer to the amenities, you know, around the reservoir. I don't, you know, I mean, I think they're still trying to work through the details of, you know, of those specific locations, but they are looking to, you know, to create additional locations for accessible parking with the closure of the loop.
Let me ask you a quick question, because I know you need a process at your end, but when will I be able to take my son to the park and take him to the areas of that loop that he is interested in using?
Well, I think that, you know, my understanding, and again, you know, as I'm sure that Hillary noted, you know, there's a bit of this that Hillary and I have both been playing catch up to relative to the concerns that you and other members of the disability community have brought to our attention. So, you know, we've been trying to respond to that internal to the city government and making sure that those comments, those concerns, those complaints, you know, are being amplified at that level. You know, my understanding is that, you know, we're trying to make change, you know, that there are changes that are trying to be made this week to then be able to relay those to the community. You know, I mean, again, I don't have, you know, we're still working on specifics, and I'm still trying to understand specifics from our chief of operations and others within city government. But, you know, there will be more information, including maps and other things that we'll be getting out to folks.
And we have Cassandra Leopold here from DOMI. She's, I think, only been here for 2 weeks, so be nice to her. She reached out to me just now and offered to provide some more information. And I know that accessibility is something that she's really interested in, and I think, you know, she'll be able to be a long-term ally for us. So Cassandra, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Wonderful. First of all, I just wanted to introduce myself to this amazing group. I am the new principal planner for the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. So I will be filling the position that Kristen Saunders used to have. For what I know specifically about this project, and Andrew was addressing broadly, is that the Reservoir Drive project is actually a Department of Public Works project. So the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure can't speak to that as we didn't initially implement it. What I did want to share, because Tina, I share your concerns, not only in my backgrounds from working from the city of Milwaukee and at the Department of Transportation in Wisconsin. I am a caregiver for my mom who is recently disabled. It is a huge thing for me to be able to maintain access. So as the new principal planner, I did want to share with the group that we have upcoming neighbor ways that Andrew is talking about, and we want to make sure everyone, that the group was informed. We wanted feedback on these platforms. We wanted to make sure that people with mobility limitations like your son could have access to these places and have feedback. So I shared with Hillary not only the DOMI page that has all our upcoming projects and ability to put in feedback. There are surveys where we want input, but also public meetings are going to be coming up, so we want feedback there. And also, I just want to say it kind of explains also on those pages what neighborways are, how they help promote and support and stand by the laws of the ADA, which is so important to us. And also just to bring up a few other point projects, we have an update to the bike plan coming that is going to be a huge improvement on network connectivity, safety. This is our first draft improvement in over 10 years. We care about all modes of transportation and we want people to feel safe how they're connecting and riding and using small mobility modes. So that's coming in and I will share that with Hillary as well. We also have our PED access safety plan coming up. That is a huge component and I want to work with Hillary closely and this task force group to make sure that your voices are heard. So whatever DOMI can do, I wanted to introduce myself and say I'm here, and that these upcoming meetings about our future projects that we do control and can help with, we definitely want your input on.
Hey, Hillary or Paul, Cassandra, I'm John Tegg, and I,
nice to meet you.
the Complete Streets Advisory Committee hasn't met since Kirsten left.
Yes.
And so the question is when's that committee going to be started again? And,
yeah.
Because again, like I said, and there's several other folks on the call, they're actually part of that committee too. And an issue like this that Tina's brought up, and Tina, by the way, you did a great job in presenting that. So I guess that's my question is when are we going to start that process again?
For sure. And I apologize since I'm so new to the position. It is actually one of my top priorities to revive that committee. We are working on completing our Complete Street guide. So I have reached out to my director as I want to reactivate that committee as soon as possible. And I will definitely be leaning on this group and the existing members to kind of help reinstate that, as I know that was an important piece before my predecessor left. So that is on the horizon, and I would reach out to Hillary to make sure that your group was up to date of when that would start and begin again.
Cassandra, this is Paul O'Hanlon. I clicked on the link for DOMI current projects and it says error, invalid input syntax.
Oh, let me go into that. Let me double check and make sure you guys have the right one. Hold on one second. Hillary, if you wouldn't mind muting me while I kind of go and dig down here, I'll send another link to the chat page.
Sounds good.
I have a question. Since there's no timetable for allowing ADA access to the amenities along the drive, do I, as a citizen, have the ability to file an ADA grievance with the city through Hillary, through your office?
Yeah, that's always an option. I think, you know, knowing that we have people who are interested in resolving this quickly, it might make more sense, you know, just to do it informally. But if you'd like to submit a formal grievance, that's always an option.
Okay, I will do that because I want the concern to be in writing. And because there's no timetable for resolving it, in the meantime, the action of the city is preventing my son from accessing this particular part of the park, which is a main part of the park.
And this is Paul again. And I guess that the thing that I want to raise here is that the city is specifically prohibited from doing this. Federal law specifically says under maintenance of accessible features, public entities must maintain in working order equipment and features of facilities that are required to provide ready access to individuals with disabilities. When a public entity must provide an accessible route, the route must remain accessible. And so, you know, I guess that, you know, there's a frustration here that when things are done like this, we're spending a whole lot of time undoing the damage, and it should have never happened in the first place. So I don't know why Public Works did this or who decided to make it so, but you know, it sort of is shocking in a sense that here we are finding out about it after the fact, and it was never considered that the city is violating the ADA.
But just a question, and for Paul and for Tina, and maybe to understand around, you know, where there's an acceptable, you know, not acceptable, you know, where there's, you know, kind of a, I mean, if there are multiple locations for ADA parking that exist and the road is closed, meaning that the road itself is now an accessible route for, you know, I mean, it's, you know, it is accessible, you know, is that acceptable? You know, I mean, because I think that, you know, in trying to find some other, you know, some way to create opportunities for social distancing while, you know, we don't have that on the pathways in the park. And, you know, as it stands now, and if those roadways are closed to allow for that, you know, whether you're, you know, which would be accessible as well as, you know, if you're in a mobility device the same way as if you were, you know, walking or you know, or you know, some other non-vehicle method, you know, is that acceptable? Is it, you know, are there certain locations that are being closed that are, you know, of greatest concern, or is it, you know, or is it more that the sentiment is, you know, either the roadway is open or, you know, or there's not access at all, and you know, and obviously there's a lot of that's up to interpretation. I just want to understand what the sentiment is from the group here.
I can answer that because I walk it all the time as a walking person. You know, I'm up there a lot, as is my son, before the closure. So this one particular loop, this 1.3 loop, there's a lot of amenities all around that loop, like I showed in the pictures. And for 2 of those amenities, there is ADA parking designated. One of those places is about halfway around the loop. It's where the accessible entrance to the reservoir is. There's a flat entry to that, and there's 2 accessible parking spaces. Now, right now, there's construction on the reservoir up there on that higher level. So you don't, you know, no one's using that particular access to the reservoir itself. But there are 2 spaces there. And those 2 spaces do represent about a halfway point in the loop, so about a half a mile. And if someone is at the entrance and they want to go to that park, which there's a significant thing up there, it's the highest point in Highland Park. It's a mound, and people go there for looking at the stars and, you know, a lot of different things. There is, unless you are a walker, a biker, and probably a power wheelchair, but definitely not a manual wheelchair user, would probably not be using their wheelchair to get all the way halfway around the loop, unless they were a wheelchair athlete. The other place where there is accessible parking is at the playground. There's a designated accessible parking place. There's an accessible swing. The playground is accessible, and there's a picnic shelter there. So the city has eliminated access to those 2 locations in particular. So you've removed access to anyone who needs to drive to those locations and use those amenities. Now, all along the loops, there's multiple picnic shelters, there's a monument, there's benches, there's all kinds of things all around the loop. And they have not had accessible parking right in front of them, but anyone before the closure, anyone could park at any point around the loop. So you didn't need to have an accessible parking space because you already could park anywhere. It was very wide open that way. So you've actually, eliminated access.
Right. And I think that that's the critical thing. I mean, they're like Frick Park, the Blue Slide Park. There are a lot of those areas that have a paved path, but it's not designed to be driven on. But that's a whole separate question from making something like Highland Park less accessible than it was. And so I think that the fundamental thing I would sort of say to the city is that at the point where you're changing things, there has to be an analysis of, does this reduce accessibility? And if it does, I don't think you can do it.
I just want to make one quick comment to that. And one is just that, just to step in for my employer here for a second, I don't think that anybody did this with any kind of intention. I do think that, we're in a totally unprecedented situation here. And I know you can't just use COVID as an excuse for everything. I don't think anybody did this with a specific intention, and the reaction internally has been pretty nimble. I will say, we probably do need more supports for ADA compliance. We're a pretty big entity, and I think we have room to grow there. But I think the city is working pretty hard to address this, and hopefully we don't. It's a misstep for sure, and I think that hopefully in the future these types of missteps don't occur. And I think that your feedback is super helpful. It's very constructive, and I think any efforts towards meaningful partnership and preventing these in the future is extremely helpful.
Well, I guess that, not to belabor the point, and I do agree that, the last few months have been sort of a time of their own. And so, but again, it's eerily reminiscent of the fact that we're moving full steam ahead with BRT, and yet all of the parking along the whole Forbes and Fifth corridor from downtown to Oakland is in question. And it's not clear whether there's going to be any accessible parking created in that whole stretch. I haven't seen any plans for that. And so again, I think that it does raise the larger issue of when changes are made and there doesn't seem to be an adequate analysis of the accessibility consequences. So I think that, there's too many examples I can point to that are still alive, that are being worked on, and that when we raise these issues, I don't get the sense that there's an acknowledgement of, okay, we can't do it that way then.
I think that's understandable, and to some degree, Hillary and I are messengers here, for the broader city. I think that, we wanted to be able to have this conversation because, given that the path right now is an 8-foot wide path that goes around this area, it's, whether it's, with social and physical distancing, it's not it limits accessibility, with social distancing as a part of that. And obviously there are a lot of contributing factors to to these changes. Again, to some degree, Hillary and I are playing catch up and being messengers, but I think that we wanted to have this conversation to try to understand where the most important pain points were, to try to understand how to, be able to advocate, within, city government relative to this item.
Mhm.
I make a comment?
Rich, go ahead.
Now, is that only, for Highland Park, or is that for all over Pittsburgh? Are we having those issues?
We're just talking about Highland Park and a single 1.3 mile loop in the park that previously was open to vehicles and had accessible parking for different amenities in that loop that's now closed off to vehicles.
But what was the motivation for that? Do we know?
Well, and I think there's many areas all over the city that could be having those same problems. Think about Mount Washington Park. Those pathways there and those streets are very narrow, and people aren't able to get through there, and there's parking all along those areas. So we may be having other issues as well.
I think the issue here is that the city announced it last Wednesday, and on Thursday it took effect. And it was something that, for me as a community member, I was not aware of it. And I came to the park and the road was closed, and there was no information at the park about how you're supposed to get ADA access.
Yeah, I think signage is one of the things that's being handled right now to rectify that. My understanding too, Andrew's alluding at this, but this was a community-driven process that there's probably a lot of room for improvement there. I believe it was a collaboration with Councilperson Gross and Bike Pittsburgh and some other stakeholders, and clearly some things kind of got lost there, and I think there's a lot of room to improve that. Yeah, so we hear you. That's for sure, and I think we can report back on those changes as soon as possible.
Karen.
Yeah, what's the name of that park again?
Highland Park Reservoir Loop.
Highland Park.
Reservoir Drive, it's the loop.
Reservoir Drive.
Hillary and Andrew, are you able to communicate within the city that the city's in violation of the ADA right now? Like this minute, you're in violation of it. Are you able to communicate that to the city as an alert that you've done something that violates the ADA? You've got to fix it.
Yeah, I think my presence in this conversation indicates that we're there, because that's usually pretty much, my entree to these issues. So I think that they're aware, and, we're fixing it as quickly as possible. I don't know if Andrew has something to add to that.
No, I think it's just understanding, again, what changes can be made to provide more opportunity for, for people to recreate in the park while maintaining, we're not here to violate the ADA, and so, we're trying to have this discussion to figure out what the right solution is to be able to allow people to utilize the park, because, with COVID-19, obviously, and social distancing, we have to, and with some of this historic infrastructure, we just have to try to figure out how to accommodate, an additional need beyond what we already had, right? And to Paul's point about prior projects and understanding how we ensure accessibility and fairness around, the rights of, of all people to be able to access space. We now just have an additional, kind of complicating factor in COVID and physical distancing, and and it's our, obviously, Hillary's role to maintain compliance with the ADA, and we'll continue to advocate for that position, and and what changes are made.
But I don't understand what closing the loop does with respect to social distancing and COVID.
Well, the right now the path is 8 feet wide, so you can't. There's limited opportunities for people to be physically distant from one another on, what is, a narrow path that is, the primary walking loop for, for that, for the park, for the kind of center of the park, and so.
Who recommended
That's
that needed to be corrected, that there was a danger of regarding social distancing? Was there a medical professional that said this is works against public health or something of that nature? Because I walk in the park every day, and there have been a lot of people on the loop, but pretty much everybody had a mask on and is keeping their own distance. So was there did something happen where somebody said this is actually dangerous to people to be walking this loop? Their health is in danger.
I mean, that's not something that I can answer one way or the other, on this. Again, it's kind of, not the person who, not the person or the department that began this project. I would say that overall, on a much more global level, I mean, obviously cities are looking at ways to, through closures of streets and other means to allow for temporary social distancing during this period of time based on CDC recommendations. But as to anything specifically around this project, this project in particular, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that there's anything relative to that, more than kind of like I said, the more kind of global general.
Yeah, but I mean that's exactly our point, because as there's this process of eliminating vehicles because of desires for social distancing and so forth, it can't be done in a way that reduces disability access. And so you can't do that if you're if you're reducing disability access, no matter what the lofty goal is.
This might be poor timing, but I just want to step in and say, Paul, we do have a hard stop at about 3:25.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for hearing me out.
Yeah, I mean, I realize that none of you are in a position to snap your fingers and say, oh, heck, we didn't realize that, we'll stop it now. But I mean, I think that that's the sense we have, that the city really should be doing, is sort of like, well, we didn't think about that, we'll stop it now. And not do it again in the future. Okay, so thank you, Tina. Anything more regarding the Highland Park issue, or are there any other things that people want to raise quickly with respect to?
Nope, you can take care of all that later, Paul.
I'll just mention one thing. Cassandra offered a couple more links that Domi would like feedback on, the Bike Plus plan and the Complete Streets Committee sign-on. Those links are in the chat, and if anybody needs me to resend them to them, please let me know and I will send them over.
Cool. The one thing I wanted to bring up before we close with respect to our next meeting is that when I posted this on Facebook, someone made the comment that too bad we're meeting during the workday. And I realized that we've had this discussion over time, but if we're going to meet remotely, it eliminates a lot of the issues that we had around access and other complications if we chose to meet at a different time. So I want to kind of plug that maybe next meeting or the meeting after that, we should consider shifting our time frame to see if we make it accessible to people who can't participate during normal work hours. Anybody have any other things they'd like to raise?
I have a comment.
Rich.
Does Paul?
Yeah.
Before we close here, I would like to go ahead and say that if you remember how the governor of the state made a decision that is telling us what to do, is it federal or government? That's what we need to look at, who's making those decisions. That way we know how to be prepared, and who is the city is gonna, we need to know who the city is following, if they're following the recommendations from the governor or from the federal government. That will really help us know where to take our next steps.
I'm not sure anybody has the answer to that. But that seems to be something that we're figuring out as we move forward. Doesn't seem to be a whole large role being played by the federal government at the moment. Any other things, any other issues, any other concerns people want to bring up at this point?
Good. Make a motion to close?
Okay, motion to adjourn.
I motion.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
All right, I guess that's all in favor of adjourning at this point. Say aye.
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 All right, well, thank you, everybody. It's been sort of a learning experience, our first Zoom call. I think that we'll probably get better as time goes on. I'm glad that people were able to join in, looking for feedback about issues or thoughts about how we can move forward. And I don't know, Hillary, do you have any other things you want to say before we close?
No, thank you all so much for being willing to try this new thing. I think it went surprisingly very well, pretty smoothly. We will try to get everything posted to YouTube. Sorry, the live aspect didn't work out. Alex and I will work on that, but overall, thanks to everybody for coming and speaking up.
Cool, thank you. All right, I guess we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.